At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law grabbed the mic and mocked me. The old cheap woman won't pay? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was supposed to be a beautiful day, a day I'd been dreaming about for years. My son, Ethan, was finally getting married to the woman he chose to spend the rest of his life with, and I wanted nothing more than to see them happy. But what I didn't expect was to be humiliated in front of all our friends and family. I had always tried to be the supportive mother, the one who took care of everything, the one who showed up and made things work. But now, I was about to find out just how little they really thought of me. I sat there, watching as my son smiled and nodded, lost in the moment with his new bride. Jenna, his wife-to-be, was the picture of perfection in her white dress, everything about her sparkling, from her jewelry to her smile. But then, everything changed. Jenna stood up, took the microphone from the wedding DJ, and in front of everyone, made the cruelest remark I could ever imagine. "The old cheap woman won't pay," she said, her voice cutting through the music and the chatter like a knife. The room went silent. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I could feel my heart racing, but I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the woman who had become part of my family, the woman who was now the one causing me the deepest pain. The shame was unbearable, but I wasn't going to let them see that. No, not today. Not in front of everyone. Instead, I smiled, a tight, forced smile, and looked away. I had been through so much in my life, and I had never felt so small. Was this what I had become? A laughingstock in front of my own family? A joke that could be made at my expense? I had always thought Jenna was the perfect match for my son. I had welcomed her into our family with open arms, supported their relationship, and even helped with their wedding plans. But now, in a moment, everything had changed. I was no longer the loving mother in her eyes. I was just an old woman with a purse that didn't open wide enough to meet her expectations. I couldn't help but wonder, had this always been her plan? To humiliate me in front of my family? To make sure everyone knew just how little I mattered? The words she said stung, but the silence that followed felt even worse. The laughter in the room, the whispers, the glances, they were all too much. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating in my own skin. But I held it together. I had to. I wasn't going to let this moment define me. Not after everything I had done for this family. Not after all the love and care I had given them. The wedding day was supposed to be their moment. But now, all I could think about was how Jenna had made it all about me. The disrespect, the cruelty, it was more than I could bear. But what could I do? I had been pushed to the edge, and yet I remained silent, waiting for the perfect moment to make my move. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not after everything I had sacrificed. And so I sat there, watching the reception unfold, a quiet storm brewing inside me. The evening continued, but my thoughts were far away from the celebration. I had made up my mind. Jenna had no idea who she was messing with. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel all eyes on me, but I refused to let it break me. Jenna had just humiliated me in front of everyone, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I sat there, forcing myself to keep my hands still on my lap, gripping the edges of my dress, trying to find some calm within the storm swirling inside me. Ethan was at the bar with his friends, his back turned to me, oblivious to the moment that had just shattered the air between us. Jenna, on the other hand, was soaking in the attention, smiling, laughing, and pretending like nothing had happened. She was the picture of the perfect bride, but beneath that perfect exterior, I knew something darker was at play. I had seen the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, the way she would roll her eyes when I spoke, the subtle insults wrapped in polite conversation. For years I had brushed it off, convinced it was just me being overly sensitive. But now, sitting here, with her mocking words hanging in the air, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had been wrong. Jenna's intentions were clear, and they had always been about control. She was trying to take what was mine, and I had been too blind to see it. The wedding, which should have been a day of celebration, had turned into a painful reminder of just how much I had been pushed to the sidelines. I had given everything for this family, always putting them first, always making sure they had everything they needed. And this was how they repaid me. I couldn't understand it. I had spent years building a life for them, sacrificing my own dreams, my own happiness, all to ensure they had the best. And what did I get in return? Humiliation. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I held them back. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not now. I had to be strong. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses continued around me, but I was far away, lost in my thoughts. I remembered the first time I met Jenna, how she seemed so sweet, so eager to please. She had always been charming, the perfect daughter-in-law. But somewhere along the way, I began to feel her resentment, a resentment that had only grown with time. It was as if she had been playing a game from the start, pretending to be the loving wife while secretly undermining me at every turn. She was always so concerned with appearances, with what people thought of her, but behind that perfect smile was a woman who saw me as a threat. And I had let her. I had let her walk all over me because I didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to create tension in the family. But now, that was over. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The wedding may have been her day, but it would be my turning point. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been living in denial for far too long. Jenna's actions were not a one-time slip-up. They were part of a larger pattern, one that I had ignored, hoping it would all get better with time. But now, the mask had come off. I could see her true colors, and I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy what little I had left. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of the guests, some of them still laughing, others glancing awkwardly in my direction. Ethan was still talking to his friends, clearly unaware of the tension building in the room. Jenna was on the dance floor now, laughing and spinning in her wedding dress, playing the part of the happy bride. But I knew the truth. She wasn't the one who had built this family. She wasn't the one who had sacrificed everything for them. No, that was me. And it was time I started acting like it. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. I had spent years being the quiet, dutiful mother, the one who always put others before herself. But that was going to change. I wasn't going to let Jenna or anyone else treat me like I was invisible. As the night wore on, I made a decision. I would let Jenna think she had won. I would play her game, but on my terms. I wasn't going to confront her today, not in the middle of all this. But when the time was right, when no one expected it, I would make sure she understood that I wasn't someone she could walk all over. And Ethan. I wasn't sure what I would do with him yet. But I knew this, he had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. He had been so caught up in his new life with Jenna that he had failed to see what was happening to me. And that, more than anything, hurt. I had always been there for him, and now, it felt like he was choosing her over me. But I wasn't going to beg for his attention or affection. I had done enough of that already. I was going to take control of my life again, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own son, make me feel small. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my eyes, and stood up. It was time to go home. The night wasn't over, but I was. I walked out of the reception hall, feeling the cool evening air hit my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Jenna, or anyone else, dictate my worth any longer. It had been a few days since the wedding, but the sting of Jenna's words still lingered in my mind. I tried to push it out of my thoughts, to move on with my life, but every time I closed my eyes I could see her standing there, holding that microphone, her words echoing in my ears. "The old sheep woman won't pay?" I replayed it over and over again, each time feeling a deeper sense of betrayal. I thought about the years I had spent raising Ethan, giving him everything I had, doing my best to make sure he had the best life possible. And now, it felt like I didn't even matter. I had worked my entire life, put in every ounce of energy to provide for this family, and yet here I was, treated like an outsider. I could still hear her voice, the way she said it so casually, as if I wasn't even human. Jenna had never been warm toward me. From the start, I could tell there was something off about her, a coldness that I couldn't quite place. But I didn't want to believe it. I thought she was just shy or unsure of her place in the family. How wrong I had been. I had given her the benefit of the doubt for so long, overlooked the little things, the dismissive comments, the way she always made sure she was the center of attention at family events. But this was different. I had spent so much time trying to make her feel welcome, trying to make her see that she was a part of the family. But all along, she had been using my son, and now, I realized, she was using me too. I was nothing more than a pawn in her game, a tool to get what she wanted. It made me sick to think about it. But instead of feeling defeated, something inside me began to shift. I had spent so many years being the quiet one, the one who kept the peace, who swallowed my hurt and kept going. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let Jenna or anyone else walk all over me. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I sat on the edge of my bed that evening, staring at the empty space where Ethan used to sit. I could still feel his presence in the house, but it was different now. He had been so distant lately, so wrapped up in his new life with Jenna. I missed him, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel angry. How could he not see what was happening? How could he be so blind to the way she was treating me? I had raised him, I had loved him, and now he was allowing this woman to tear our family apart. The realization hit me hard. He was no longer the little boy who had looked up to me. He had grown into a man who was willing to let his mother be humiliated, as long as it meant keeping the peace with his wife. I thought back to all the moments I had tried to make him proud, all the sacrifices I had made to give him everything he wanted. I had worked long hours, missed out on vacations, and gave up my own dreams just to make sure he had a better life. And this was how he repaid me? By standing by and letting Jenna treat me like I was nothing? It hurt more than I could say, but I wasn't going to let that pain control me anymore. I wasn't going to let them tear me down. I had spent too many years building up my strength, building up my life, to let anyone take it away. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to let Jenna have the power. I wasn't going to let her control me. I had spent too many years trying to please everyone, trying to be the good mother, the good mother-in-law, the good wife. But now, it was time for me to be something else. It was time for me to stand up for myself. The thought of confronting Jenna made my stomach turn, but I knew it was something I had to do. I had to make her see that she couldn't just push me around. I wasn't some old woman who could be dismissed and forgotten. I had fought for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let her take it from me. The next day, I started making plans. I wasn't sure how I was going to handle this, but I knew I had to be strategic. Jenna thought she had won. She thought she had humiliated me, broken me down, made me feel small. But she was wrong. She had underestimated me. And now, I was going to show her just how wrong she was. I didn't expect it to be so difficult, but as the days passed, I could feel myself slowly gathering the courage to confront Jenna. She had humiliated me, yes, but the truth was, I had been allowing it for far too long. Every subtle insult, every dismissive comment, every time she tried to push me aside, I had let it slide, hoping things would change. But I had been wrong. Things weren't going to change unless I made them. The night after the wedding, I sat in my living room, thinking about everything that had happened. Ethan hadn't even asked how I was doing. He hadn't reached out to check on me, not even after what Jenna had done. I felt a deep pit in my stomach. I knew my son, I knew how much he cared for me, but I also knew how easily he had been swept up in his new life with Jenna. How easily he had forgotten everything that mattered to me. I wondered if I was just another phase in his life, something he could discard when it no longer suited him. But that wasn't going to happen anymore. I wasn't going to let her control my place in this family. I had spent far too many years being the one who kept the peace, the one who smiled and nodded while my own needs went unacknowledged. No more. I stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the night. The world felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, but at the same time, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had always been the one to sacrifice. I had given everything for my family, for my son, for my husband. And now, it felt like I had nothing left to give. But I was wrong. I still had myself. I had the power to take back what was mine, to regain my dignity, my respect. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The next day, I called Jenna. She picked up on the second ring, her voice light and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Hello, Maggie! How's it going?" She was pretending nothing was wrong, but I wasn't going to let her get away with that. "Jenna," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by a strained laugh. "Oh? About what?" she asked, clearly trying to play it off. "About what you said at the wedding," I replied, my voice steady. "And about how you've been treating me." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. "Maggie, she started, but I cut her off. Don't apologize. This isn't about apologies. It's about respect." There was another long pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't used to me standing up for myself, and I could tell she wasn't sure how to handle it. But I wasn't going to back down this time. "I've let you walk all over me for far too long," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "And I'm done. I'm done being the one who always gives and never receives. I'm done being your doormat." There was a shift in the air. I could almost feel her on the other side of the phone, her smugness slipping away. "You're out of line, Maggie," she said, her tone icy now. "You have no idea what it's like to be in my shoes. You think you can just demand respect like that? You're old, and you're irrelevant." The words stung, but I didn't let them show. "You're wrong, Jenna," I said quietly. "I may be old, but I'm not irrelevant. And I won't let you treat me like I don't matter." There was a silence again, but this time it was different. I could tell she was beginning to realize that I wasn't going to back down. "What do you want, Maggie?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly now. "What do I want?" I repeated, the question rolling off my tongue. "I want respect. I want my place in this family to be recognized. I want my son to see me, to remember who I am, and to stop letting you push me aside." There was another long pause, and I could tell she was struggling to come up with something to say. But there was nothing she could say. Not anymore. "You're not getting rid of me, Jenna," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm not going anywhere. And neither is my love for my son." With that, I hung up. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation settle in. I didn't feel relief, not yet, but I did feel something stirring inside me. It was a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. Power. Strength. And a sense of resolve that I wasn't going to let anyone take away my place in this family. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small again. And if Jenna thought she had won, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The days that followed the conversation with Jenna felt different. There was a new weight in the air, a change I couldn't quite explain. I had stood up for myself, something I had never done before. I had let the hurt and anger build for so long, but now, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small again. The phone call had been a turning point, but it wasn't enough. I knew Jenna was still out there, playing her games, trying to make sure I stayed in my place. But I wasn't going to let her. I spent the next few days quietly observing, watching the way she interacted with everyone. She was still the same, pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect wife, but the cracks were starting to show. I could see the way she looked at Ethan, the way she tried to manipulate him with her sweet words and fake smiles. It made my blood boil. How could he not see it? How could he still be blind to the way she was controlling him, using him, and now, trying to do the same to me? But I couldn't let my anger get the best of me. I had to be strategic. I had to play this carefully. Jenna thought she had me beaten. She thought I was a helpless, old woman, easy to push around. But she was wrong. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't going to let her get away with what she had done. The next time I saw Jenna, I made sure to keep my distance. I watched her as she pretended to be the doting wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. But I could see through the act. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to make me feel like I didn't belong, like I was the one who was in the wrong. But I wasn't going to play her game. I was going to take back control. I spent the next week planning my next move. I knew I had to get Ethan on my side, but it wasn't going to be easy. He had always been so wrapped up in his own life, so focused on his new family with Jenna, that he had stopped seeing me. He had stopped caring. And that hurt more than anything. I couldn't let him stay in the dark forever. I had to make him see the truth, to make him realize that his wife was not the woman he thought she was. But I couldn't just tell him. I had to show him. I had to prove it. So, I waited for the right moment. And when it came, I took my shot. I invited Ethan over for dinner, just the two of us. I had planned everything carefully, down to the smallest detail. I wanted to make sure this conversation would go my way. When he walked in, I greeted him with a warm smile, trying to keep my emotions in check. I had always been the one to make sure everything was perfect, and this time was no different. The table was set, the food was ready, and everything was as it should be. But there was one thing I had added, one thing I knew would get his attention. I had kept the letter, the one that proved Jenna had been hiding money from him. The one that showed she had been lying to him about everything. I could see the curiosity in his eyes as he sat down, his attention finally focused on me. "What's all this about, Mom?" he asked, his voice warm, but laced with uncertainty. I took a deep breath and smiled. "It's time we had a conversation," I said softly, sliding the letter across the table toward him. "A conversation about Jenna." His eyes flickered to the letter, then back to me. I could see the hesitation in his gaze, but he didn't speak. "What's in that letter?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's something you need to see," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let him stay blind any longer. He reached for the letter, unfolding it carefully, his eyes scanning the words as he read. I watched his face as the truth began to sink in. His expression changed from confusion to shock, then to anger. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" he asked, looking up at me, his voice shaking. "I didn't want to cause trouble," I said quietly. "But now you need to see the truth. Jenna has been lying to you. She's been manipulating you, using you. And she's been doing the same to me." Ethan sat back in his chair, his face pale. "I didn't know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I had no idea." I nodded. "I know you didn't. But now you do. And now you need to decide what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to keep letting her control you, or are you going to stand up for what's right?" There was a long pause as he stared at the letter, his mind racing. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the battle between the man he had become and the son he used to be. I wasn't sure what he would do next, but I knew this was the moment that would define our future. I wasn't going to beg for his love, but I was going to make sure he knew the truth. And that was all I could do. I had done my part. The rest was up to him. The days following our conversation were filled with an awkward silence between Ethan and me. I could tell he was processing everything, but the weight of the truth hung heavy between us. I tried to keep busy, distracting myself with the everyday tasks that had always brought me comfort. Cooking, cleaning, organizing, it was the same routine, but it no longer felt like it used to. The house, once a warm and inviting space, felt cold now, like a shell of what it had been. Ethan hadn't come by again, and Jenna's absence made it feel even emptier. I could hear the silence loud and clear, and it made me wonder if I had made a mistake. Should I have just let things be? But no, I knew deep down that I had done the right thing. I had opened his eyes, even if it meant facing the truth that neither of us were ready for. The truth that Jenna, the woman he had married, had been using him and me all along. That evening, after dinner, I decided to take a walk in the park. I needed to clear my head, to give Ethan the space he needed to process everything I had told him. As I walked, I found myself reflecting on the years I had spent raising him, the sacrifices I had made to give him a good life. I had worked hard, often working 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed. I had always tried to shield him from the harsh realities of life, to give him a sense of security. But now, I realized, I had been shielding him from the truth too. He had been living in a bubble, and I had allowed it to continue for far too long. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had raised him to be strong, to be independent, but I had never taught him how to recognize manipulation or how to stand up for the people who loved him. And that was my fault. I should have done better. As the evening grew darker, I found myself standing in front of the old bench where Ethan and I used to sit together when he was a boy. It felt like a lifetime ago. I used to hold his hand, listening to his little stories, watching him grow up. But now, that little boy was a man, and the distance between us seemed greater than ever. I sat down on the bench, staring up at the stars, feeling a sense of emptiness wash over me. I wanted so badly to reach out to him, to fix things, but I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. The park was quiet, save for the rustling of the leaves in the trees. It was peaceful, but it also reminded me of the silence that had taken over my life. I had always prided myself on being a good mother, a supportive wife, and a loyal friend. But now, I was left to question everything. Had I been too passive? Had I allowed people to take advantage of me for too long? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living in this silence. I couldn't keep allowing Jenna to dictate the terms of my life, to control my relationship with my son. I needed to take control back. I needed to fight for my place in this family. And that was exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. I knew I had to talk to Ethan again. I couldn't let this go unresolved. I couldn't let Jenna keep him in the dark, keep him under her thumb. But I also knew that I had to be patient. He wasn't ready to face the truth yet, but he would be. I just had to give him the time he needed. I spent the rest of the morning preparing a letter. It wasn't something I had planned to do, but it felt like the right thing. I couldn't keep trying to talk to him face to face when he wasn't ready to listen. So, I wrote him a letter, pouring my heart out, explaining everything I had kept bottled up for so long. I told him how much I loved him, how much I had sacrificed for him, and how I could no longer stand by and watch him be manipulated. I explained everything about Jenna, about the lies, about the games she had been playing. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't hold back. I just told him the truth. When the letter was finished, I sat there for a moment, staring at the words on the page. It felt like I was finally letting go of all the pain, all the frustration I had been carrying. I wasn't sure what would happen when Ethan read it, but I knew I couldn't keep carrying this weight. I had to let it go. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and wrote his name on it. I took a deep breath and left the house, heading to his apartment. I didn't know what would happen when I gave him the letter, but I knew I had done everything I could. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my place in this family, toward making sure my voice was heard. When I reached his door, I hesitated for a moment, but then I knocked. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweating. But this was it. This was the moment. Ethan opened the door, looking surprised to see me. I handed him the envelope without saying a word. He took it, his expression unreadable. I turned to leave, but just before I reached the stairs, I heard him call my name. "Mom, wait!" I stopped in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. I slowly turned around, looking at him, unsure of what he was going to say. He looked at the letter in his hand, then back at me. "I'll read it," he said softly. "And I'll think about everything you've said." The words were simple, but they meant the world to me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance to make things right. Days passed, and though I tried not to think about the letter I had left for Ethan, it was impossible not to. I couldn't shake the hope that he would read it, that he would finally understand everything I had been holding inside for so long. It wasn't easy, sitting in silence, waiting for him to come to terms with what had happened. I had always been the one to solve problems, to take action, but this was different. This was something I couldn't control. I couldn't force Ethan to see the truth. He had to come to it on his own. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, step back and give him space, let him figure it out for himself. But it was the only way. The next few days were filled with a tense quiet. I went about my routine, the same as always, but there was a weight in the air. I kept expecting him to call, to ask about the letter, but nothing came. I tried not to let it get to me. Maybe he just needed more time. But as each day passed, my doubt began to creep in. What if he didn't understand? What if he thought I was overreacting? What if this was the end of our relationship, the end of the bond one had worked so hard to build with him? I couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not after everything we had been through. I had always been there for him, through every challenge, every heartbreak, and every triumph. I had done everything for him, and yet it felt like I was losing him to Jenna. But even with those doubts, I refused to give up. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I knew deep down that Ethan was a good person, that he wasn't trying to hurt me, but he had been blinded by his love for Jenna. I just needed to remind him of who he was, of the family that had always been there for him. That afternoon, as I was making dinner, I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated before walking over. I opened it slowly, and there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway, holding the letter I had given him. I couldn't read his face, but the look in his eyes told me everything. He had read it. He had taken it seriously. "Mom," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Can we talk?" I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared so many meals together over the years. The same table where he had once sat as a child, telling me about his day. But now, there was a distance between us, a gap that felt impossible to bridge. "I read the letter," he began, his voice shaky. "I had no idea. I never saw it before. I never saw how things were affecting you." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pushed it down. "Ethan, you're my son. I've always been there for you. I just wanted you to see what was happening too. See the truth." He nodded slowly, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I've been so caught up in my own life, I didn't even notice what was going on with you. I didn't realize how much Jenna had been manipulating me, or how much she had been trying to drive a wedge between us." His words hit me like a wave of relief. He was seeing it now. He was understanding what I had been trying to tell him. But even as I felt that relief, a part of me couldn't help but feel the bitterness of everything that had been lost. The years of quiet sacrifice, the years of being the one to always hold everything together, only for him to realize the truth now, when it was almost too late. "It's not just you, Ethan," I said quietly. "It's me too. Jenna has been playing games with both of us, and I let it happen. I didn't want to cause trouble, didn't want to lose you. But now, I realize I can't just stay silent. I can't let her tear this family apart." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen it. I should have been there for you. I should have been more aware." I reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not too late, Ethan. But we have to be honest with each other from now on. We have to stand up for what's right, even if it means facing uncomfortable truths." He nodded, his grip tightening around mine. "I'll talk to Jenna," he said, his voice resolute. I'm not going to let her control me anymore. I'm not going to let her come between us. I could feel the weight of his words, the promise in his tone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild what had been broken. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. There was a long road ahead of us, filled with challenges and hard conversations. But at least we were finally on the same page. And for that, I was grateful. Thank you, Ethan, I said, my voice soft. Thank you for seeing it. Thank you for being here. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that made my heart swell with pride. You're my mom, he said simply. I'll always be here for you. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a quick fix. But it was a start. And in that moment, I knew that things could get better. We could heal. Together. The days after Ethan and I spoke felt like a shift in the air. There was an uncomfortable quiet between us, but it was different than before. It wasn't the silence of distance. It was the silence of something that was starting to be rebuilt, even if we both didn't quite know how to make it right. I didn't expect everything to be fixed overnight, but at least now, we were starting from a place of honesty. I kept busy, cleaning the house, doing the usual chores. But every once in a while, I would catch myself wondering what was going to happen next. What would Ethan say to Jenna? Would he confront her, or would he still be too caught up in the life they had built together? I didn't know. But I knew this much: things had to change. I couldn't keep living like I had been, quietly accepting whatever came my way, hoping that eventually things would improve. I had to be stronger than that. And somehow, so did Ethan. A week passed before I got my answer. Ethan came by the house one evening, his expression serious, his eyes a little tired. He sat down at the kitchen table with me, the weight of the conversation he was about to have hanging heavy between us. I talked to her, he said quietly. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Part of me was terrified of what he might say, of what Jenna might have said to him. But another part of me knew that whatever happened, we could face it together. And? I asked, keeping my voice steady. It wasn't easy, he began. But I told her everything. I told her how I felt manipulated, how I didn't even realize what was happening until you pointed it out to me. I could see the guilt in his eyes, and it made my heart ache. I didn't want to hurt her, he continued, but I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep allowing her to treat me, or you, the way she has. His voice faltered for a moment. I was blind, Mom. I didn't see it. I didn't see how she had been isolating me from you, how she made me feel like I had to choose between her and you. I reached out and placed my hand on his, offering a silent comfort. He had always been my boy, the one I had raised, and seeing him finally come to terms with everything was painful but also, in some strange way, relieving. What did she say? I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan let out a breath and looked away for a moment. She tried to deny it at first. She said I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. But when I told her that I couldn't be part of the marriage if it meant I had to keep ignoring what she was doing, she started to cry. She told me she didn't mean to hurt me. But I think deep down, she knows what she's been doing. There was a long pause as we both let the weight of his words settle in. I told her I needed space. Ethan continued. That I needed time to think about everything, to figure out where I stood. And that's where we are now. I'm not sure what will happen next, but I can't keep ignoring what's been going on. I nodded, feeling a sense of pride in my son. He had finally seen it. He had finally started to stand up for what was right. I'm proud of you, Ethan, I said softly. I know it's not easy. But you're doing the right thing. He smiled faintly, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Thanks, Mom. I don't know where things will go from here, but I know one thing: I'm not going to let her control me anymore. I'm not going to let her dictate my life, or our relationship. I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling with love for him. You're stronger than you think, I said, my voice full of emotion. You've always been strong, Ethan. And now you're starting to see that strength for yourself. There was a long silence as we both sat there, letting the weight of the situation sink in. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Things weren't perfect. The road ahead would still be difficult, but we were taking steps towards something better. I didn't know if Jenna would change, or if Ethan would be able to make peace with her. But I knew one thing: he was finally seeing the truth, and he wasn't going to let anyone manipulate him anymore. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that, together, we could face whatever came next. We had already come so far, and we had a chance to rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to fight for my family, for the love I had given for so many years. And if that meant standing up for myself, standing up for Ethan, then that's exactly what I was going to do. Weeks had passed since the conversation with Ethan, and though the tension had eased slightly, it still felt like we were walking on fragile ground. It was clear that things weren't going to be simple, and there would be plenty of hard conversations ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving towards something better. Ethan and I had been talking more honestly, and I could see that he was making an effort to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But there was still Jenna. I didn't know what to expect from her or how she would react to everything that had been said. Would she change? Would she see the consequences of her actions? Or would she keep manipulating the situation to suit her own needs? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't going to let her control me anymore. I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms of my life or my relationship with Ethan. I had spent too many years playing by her rules, and now it was time for me to take control. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, alone with my thoughts. The house was quiet, and it felt like the calm before a storm. I knew Jenna had to be confronted again. I had told Ethan the truth, but now I needed to tell Jenna. I needed her to understand that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't keep pushing me around and thinking she could get away with it. I wasn't going to let her make me feel invisible anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. It rang a few times before she picked up, her voice cheery, almost too cheery. "Maggie! How are you?" she asked, the fake warmth in her tone almost palpable. "We need to talk," I said, cutting straight to the point. There was a pause on the other end. "Talk? About what?" she replied, her voice suddenly guarded. "About everything," I said, my voice steady. "About the way you've been treating me, the way you've been manipulating Ethan, and the way you've been trying to push me out of my own family." I could hear her breath catch on the other end of the line. "Maggie, I don't know what you're talking about. I've always been good to you," she said, trying to play the innocent card. But I wasn't buying it anymore. "No, Jenna," I said firmly. "You haven't. You've been playing a game, trying to drive a wedge between Ethan and me. And I won't let you do that anymore. I won't let you tear apart this family." There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke, her voice low and defensive. "You don't understand, Maggie. You don't know what it's like. Ethan and I have our own life now. You're just holding on to the past, trying to stay in control. You need to let go." I felt a surge of anger rising within me, but I kept it in check. "I'm not holding on to the past, Jenna," I said, my voice steady. "I'm holding on to my family, my son, and the respect I deserve. You can't just push me aside because you think you're entitled to everything. This isn't just about you and Ethan. This is about all of us. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm part of this family, and you need to accept that." The line went quiet again, and I could hear her breathing heavily. I knew she was processing my words, but I wasn't sure how she would react. "I'm not going to back down, Jenna," I said, my voice firm. "I've spent too many years being silent, too many years letting you push me around. But that ends now. You can't control me, and you can't control Ethan either." Finally she spoke, her voice shaking with anger. "You think you can just tell me what to do? You're just an old woman, Maggie. No one cares about what you think." The words stung, but I refused to let them break me. "You're wrong," I said softly. "You don't get to define my worth. I've earned my place here, and I'm not going anywhere. There was another long pause, and this time, I could hear the frustration in her voice. "You're making a big mistake, Maggie," she said. "You're pushing me away. And you're going to regret it." I could feel the weight of her words, but I didn't let them shake me. "Maybe I am pushing you away," I said, "but that's because I'm finally standing up for myself. I'm finally putting myself first for once. And that's something I should have done a long time ago." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. For a moment, I thought she might hang up. But instead, she spoke again, her voice softer now, almost resigned. "I don't know if I can change, Maggie," she said, her words heavy with something I couldn't quite place. "I don't know if I can fix things." "I'm not asking you to change, Jenna," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to respect me, and to respect Ethan. If you can't do that, then maybe we don't have a place in each other's lives anymore." I waited for her response, but there was nothing but silence. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke again, my voice steady. "You can keep trying to control things, Jenna. But I'm not going to let you anymore. I'm done." And with that, I hung up the phone. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally taken control of my life. I had spoken my truth, and I had set the boundaries I needed. Whatever came next, I knew I would be ready for it. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Jenna, tear me down anymore.